So I would offer that I think the recovery is going to be slower and longer than we might have expected just a few weeks ago. I think as for how our government is done, I split that into two pieces. On the healthcare side, I think we see that Canada's done a remarkable job. And I think you're seeing the flattening of the curve. It was just announced yesterday that Ontario, our experience in Ontario is ahead of our best case. And I think Canada will stand up globally as a country that had coordinated government policy and a population that was prepared to follow what their government had to say. On the economic front, it's far too early to judge. It's been obviously a tremendously difficult file to manage. And we're now in just a really broad range of programs which are going to be ever challenging to administer and to ultimately roll back. And at the end of all of this, we'll really have two challenges. One, how do we take this shared experience and build on Canada to really seize some of the opportunities that we have? And two, how are we going to manage the financial overhang of this difficult period? I think it'll be both. It certainly won't be turning a switch back and, a week Thursday, everything is the way it was. But society never goes back to the way it was. We're always learning and evolving. Clearly, everyone I deal with today knows how to use Zoom, whereas 60 days ago, many of us didn't. I think we'll see adaptations in how we work, how we shop, how we recreate, and where and how we live. And many of these will be acceleration of trends already in place, and many of them will hold interesting and exciting opportunities. I think some of the opportunities that exist, looking forward, include differentiating real estate in a bioethical perspective. We've been focused on a climate change agenda, which will continue because we're aggressively on that program. But there's now this new opportunity to create extra value for our tenants, which I think will be pretty interesting. As for risks, I think the risks are not thinking through how to avoid this kind of deep fiscal calamity again. And that then goes to how do we look at our supply chains on critical elements such as healthcare supplies, the food chain, etc. And I think it will require a rethink of a lot of the processes that we have been doing, global supply chain, strategic relationships, trade relationships, and others. And as part of that review, Canada will have all sorts of opportunities because at the end of the day, we have resources, we are resourceful, and we are well educated. And so from a global perspective, we are well positioned to take advantage of whatever lays ahead of us. That I think is such a tricky question for two reasons. One is that no one, myself included, really knows what the future holds, and my firmly held views change, on a regular basis. So, or as a friend of mine used to say, I reserve the right to be smarter than I am, to next week be smarter than I am today. I think there's opportunities in every asset class. In office, you're going to see a move probably to de-densify. You'll also see different work from home initiatives that I think can definitely coexist. In residential, I think you'll see a greater focus on design that allows for a better working at home environment, and that may change some of the focus of what some of the amenities do. In retail, I think the opportunity is to create a meeting place that people feel safe and welcome and taken care of. In industrial, I think there'll be an expansion based on increased duplication, of various supply and storage elements needed in the changes to the global supply chain. And of course, the first issue, we've got 120 people in our office, in our head office, and who are all working at home. So issue number one is how to make all those people feel connected and productive. And what I've done is I have a blog every morning that I send out to all employees internally, talking about what's going on from my perspective in the world, in the industry, and specifically what's going on at KingSett. And then on Fridays, we have a webinar, an all-employee webinar, which is interactive. And it's been fascinating to hear the questions that people are asking, because it shows what's on people's minds. The second piece would be stakeholder management, which is a big outreach to our investors and other financial stakeholders. Because my experience has always been that people in times of uncertainty need to hear what's going on with an ever greater clarity, transparency, and regularity. And so I've been aggressively doing that. And I must say that we've enjoyed tremendous support from our stakeholders and appreciate their candor back. Actually, my first crisis was in the early 80s. So I've been through a number of crises. I think the difference for KingSett in this environment is our business is intact, our assets are intact. We're having some challenges with some tenants on payments, and we're working our way through that. But there's nothing that I see today that is a systemic risk to KingSett, which is very different than the crisis we've had before. And to give a point of reference, in the early 90s, where our industry was, basically in financial collapse, there were times when I was anxious about making payroll, and there was times when I did not know. I was with Oxford at the time. I had times when I did not know whether Oxford would exist in a week, a month, a year. So those times were quite different. And I must say, in those darkest times, one of the things that I did regularly is meet with our team physically, and we would have huddles and cuddles. Now, a huddle was a meeting that anybody could call if a very bad piece of news came in, and within an hour we would all gather and discuss that piece of news. A cuddle was 911, and everybody would drop whatever they were doing and meeting. And the strength of the team and the physical association of that team allowed us the power to work our way through it. So Oxford did make its way through the early 90s, and it was a really interesting, challenging, stimulating, and as I look back, rewarding part of my career. 08-09 was a little bit of a made in TV recession for Canadians, because the impact in Canada, other than terror, was relatively minor. Obviously, stocks went down, and if you didn't sell any, they went back up, and so life kind of went on. But other than terror, it didn't really impact the business too much. This is different again because everybody's shut down. And if you're in a business that relies on being a physical presence to operate or have revenue, you're a donut store or a jewelry store or whatever you might be, this is an existential crisis. Our business continues to operate, and other businesses that continue to operate. It is obviously different to be remote and on TV screens and so on and so forth. But it's not the same depth of existential crisis. And I'm of the view that while the recovery will be slower and longer, the recovery will happen. This is a health crisis. And we will get over the health crisis and return to opening up the economy and getting back to business. Things will be different, but they're always different. And part of a successful business is thinking through what those adaptations will be and how to manage through the risks and the opportunities that they lay out for us. Leading at times of crisis it really puts an excess premium on great values. And that's transparency, communication, talking to people. As I mentioned, we have I write a blog to all of our people every morning talking about what's going on. And people have never probably seen as much communication about what's going on at KingSett as they have over the last 35 days. I have, with the executive committee, we have a check-in every morning at 8:30, and we go through sort of the issues of the days, concerns, things we're following up on. And it's a time where you've got to communicate, you've got to be transparent, you can't gild the lily, it is what it is. But also, leadership is about saying, here's what's next, and here's what we're anticipating, and here's what we're doing about it. Because it is easy for all of us with all the social media as well as electronic media to hear stories that are increasingly anxiety driven. And the fact is, this is a health crisis. It too will end. The only thing that all crises have in common is they come to an end. So will this, and we'll move on. And I think as a leader, it's important to make sure people understand that, and people know that, well, it may get worse before it gets better. We don't know, but it will get better, and we'll be here, and we'll be doing things. And so I think it puts greater emphasis on a leader to clearly talk about conditions on the ground as they are, but also where we're going, what we're going to do about it, and why can we make it? Why can we get it through this? And so I've tried to go to great pains with our employees, our stakeholders, our boards, anyone who will take my call and tell them about my assessment of where we are, my assessment of what's next, as well as where I think there's opportunities and risks going forward, and why KingSett's well positioned to take advantage of that. So this is a time when people should reach out and connect with anyone and everyone. And because reaching out and connecting at a time when everyone's in self-isolation is so needed by everybody. Everybody wants to see somebody else, connect with somebody else, just check in, how are you doing? And I think building your individual toolkit that people should be asking, that people they work with or report to or whatever, what can I do today, this week? What are my expectations? I need some clarity. Seek that clarity and then execute that strategy. Have discipline. Get up in the morning, have a shower, put on a shirt or dress, dress as if you're going to work. No tie today, but it is still working. You still got to work your way through this. You've got to adapt your habits in a remote, isolated scenario to be able to do that. And I think people that can reach out, can focus on getting a scope of work done that is valued by those they work with, as well as reaching out to others and just say, I just want to check in, see how you're doing. What's going on? What do you see? Those are valuable career builders for anyone.